The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Donna Conrad. Hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. And yourself?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm looking at your web page here, and it looks like you've written quite a few books. There's a couple I want to hit on. Your latest one is called House of the Moon, Surviving the 60s. Is that the one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll get to that one in a second, though. I wanted to hit on the Jim Morrison one, 50 years after the end.
Yeah, those are blog posts that I added because in House of the Moon, Surviving the 60s, I had interactions with some rock stars, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Joni Mitchell, but there's only so much room in a book to include those. So I started doing blogs about other interactions.
You met Jim Morrison?
Oh, yes, many times.
Oh, well, tell us a little about that, because I don't think I've ever interviewed anybody who's met Jim Morrison. So that's interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Yes. Well, I was young. My sister's 4 years older than I was at the time, and her boyfriend dealt drugs, not hard drugs, but, regular kind of drugs, to all the bands that came through Los Angeles. So that was my introduction. My big sister would take me backstage with all these people.
How old were you at that point?
14.
Oh, all right.
So my book only covers from 14 to 18. And, so I met Jim Morrison first when the Doors were still playing the Cheetah Club in Santa Monica and doing noon shows, double bill shows. So they hadn't hit it big yet on Ed Sullivan. And I've got to tell you, they were different than any other band out there.
How so?
It was pretty phenomenal. Well, other bands in the 60s, especially in the mid-60s and that, you had bands that were talking about peace and love and getting together. You had bands like the Beatles that were still doing kind of contemporary topics. And then you had the Doors with Jim Morrison out in front playing music that you hadn't heard before with that incredible organ, the riffs that he would do on the organ. And then you had Morrison's poetry, which was exceptional in and of itself and was different. And what I say in that 50 years after blog is that he shouted out our angst and our frustrations. And he said that we needed to interact with life differently than we were. And that was something other bands weren't saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, now that I think about it, he was kind of like a beat poet with this organ backdrop. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which would be very different.
It was an exceptional time.
Yeah, amazing. So what was he like? Did you get to talk to him?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So you've got to figure this is all tempered through the mind of a 14-year-old. And right at first, he really scared me because he was so different. And then as I got to know him more, he was an incredible poet. He was very deep. He cared intensely about life and the artist's interaction with life, which was something I didn't find with other people I met, with other rock stars in that. When I would just say this, when Morrison was on psychedelics or on other drugs, he was an incredibly insightful, caring, intense person that could be related to. Later, when he started drinking, he turned into being a mean, angry, violent, uncaring person. And to me, that's the difference between most drugs and alcohol. It's what part of the brain and the psyche they stimulate.
I would have to agree with you on that because I have never seen a drug that can turn people so mean as alcohol. People that smoke marijuana don't get like that.
Exactly. You can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And also, I've never known anybody doing any kind of hallucinogens, that turn violent. They might get scared and they might try to run or react, but it doesn't make a basic change in their personality.
They don't become violent towards other people. Yeah, I would agree.
Exactly.
So at the time that you met Jim Morrison, you were only 14 years old. I mean, all of these observations are very astute for a 14-year-old. I would have thought that because, he was a pretty good-looking guy that you might have just, had a teenage crush on him or something like that.
Well, when I first met him when I was 14, like I said, we went behind the cheetah and he was just sitting on the bumper of a car. And he really did kind of scare me. I mean, he was, and maybe if you think of that as a 14-year-old, it scared me because I was attracted to him. But he was primal, is what I could say. And then as I got to know him better over the course of the next couple of years, I began to really appreciate him as a poet. And then so one of the chapters in my book, it's called Dionysus at the Shrine, is on my 15th birthday, they played the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. And afterwards, I somehow got shoved in a limo. Young women tended to have that happen to them, and ended up at the hotel with him. And at that point, maybe I was older, maybe I saw him differently, but then I was really attracted to him. And he became this Dionysus. He was the god of wine and frivolity and celebration. And so it changed at that point. And then I saw him a few more times and got to know him as he increased the alcohol. And then that changed things until it was like, okay, this is enough.
So you were friends with him? I mean...
I wasn't one of the regular group that hung around him. When he came to LA or anywhere in the Los Angeles area, I went to see him, and I'd like to say the difference, let's see. Yeah, I would go to house parties and he would be there. And in the beginning, he would be basically what you said, the beat poet. He'd be sitting around and somebody'd be playing the bongos and he'd be riffing with poetry. And it was phenomenal. Later, he started having, guys there that were looking after him. I don't know if they were bodyguards or what. And the parties got a little crazier. And they were usually in hotels as opposed to just someone's house.
Would he have known you? In other words, when you got into a room, he'd recognize you and say, "Oh, hi, Donna, how are you?"
Well, yeah, he always said, "Hi, Shirley's little sister."
Oh, okay.
I was always...
All right. Well, that's cool.
He
That's
called
interesting.
me Teeny Bopper for a while. He called me Flower Child for a while.
Okay.
And I always remember the song. He came, you walk across the floor with that flower in your hand, saying, I don't understand. And when I first met him, I definitely was that peace and love and everything is groovy. And then I began to mature rather rapidly because of all the things that were going on in my life.
Sure.
And
well, that's very cool. That's a great story. Like I said, I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone who has met Jim Morrison because he unfortunately didn't live that long. He was gone by the time he was, 27?
27.
Yeah.
And not that long after, he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Doors were.
Yeah, it was only a few years.
But, the Doors were, the Doors were a local band before they became a national band.
Oh, yeah.
So anybody who lived in L.A., went down to Venice Beach, that area, they were accessible.
Yeah, they were definitely an L.A. band. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That was great. Let's talk a little bit about your book, House of the Moon, Surviving the 60s. Kind of along the same theme, at least in the time frame. Covina, California. I've actually been to Covina, California. I had a friend from there.
Have you?
Yeah. I know. It's a famous place. Yeah. What weren't the Van Halen brothers from Covina?
I don't know.
Eddie and Alex.
You would know that better than I do.
I thought they grew up in Covina. Yeah. Somehow that rings a bell.
Well, as I say in the beginning of the book, that Covina, California, was a clean white place to live in the 60s. And it's where parents took their kids to be safe. But it was, a maze of 3-bedroom, 2-bath housing tracts with wide streets and narrow minds. So it was very much an enclave. Everything was supposed to be good and clean and dutiful.
The sort of the Leave It to Beaver neighborhood, yeah.
You got it, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of those neighborhoods aren't the same anymore, that's for sure. It was a different world in the 60s. I know I was born in North Hollywood, California. I never lived there, but I was born there in 1962. At that time, apparently, the doctors did not tell women that they shouldn't fly when they're 9 months pregnant. And my mother and father, they flew out to L.A. to visit one of my father's Navy buddies who had just bought a house in North Hollywood. And oops, she decided to give birth right at that when they got there. And so I was born in North Hollywood, but I've been back there since, and the people that I'm referring to still live in the same house. But that neighborhood is you can tell, is completely different than what it was in 1960. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And even the neighborhood, I went back when I wrote this book, and actually in the book are pictures of my house as it was in 2016. Went back and looked at it, and like my high school now has gates and, wrought iron fences all around it, metal detectors.
Yeah.
It would be really hard to ditch school, which I did. You just walk out the door and walk through the oak grove, and you'd be off campus.
Yeah.
So it was a much more innocent time.
That's true. So give us a bit of a synopsis of the book, if you would. I mean, don't give it all away. I hate having people come on the show to promote a book and tell everything about the book, and then nobody wants to buy the book afterwards because they felt like they read it.
They read it.
Yeah, the author told so much about the book. So just give us a teaser. Give us a trailer, like a movie trailer. Yeah?
Oh, actually, I can read it off the back of the book. But what this book is a realistic depiction of what it was like to be a teenager in the 60s. Not to be anybody famous, although I did know, some famous people through my sister. But what was it like to wake up in the trenches of the 60s? And we have so many liberties now that we didn't have in the 60s, especially for women and for people of color. And so the 60s were not a liberated time. it was a time when the government and your parents and religion and all the schools controlled you and didn't want you to think for yourself, which is why we had to fight for freedom of speech. So this is a story of what it was like to be that person that was there at that time. And a caveat with that, my father was an undercover agent for the state of California with 2 teenage daughters in the 60s.
Oh.
So it was, yeah. I asked him before he died if he ever realized that we had done so many drugs and everything. He said, no, you guys weren't doing any drugs. And I'm like, okay. Denial is not a river in Egypt.
Did he actually not know, or did he just pretend not to know?
I think he chose not to know. I think he rationalized things away.
See no evil. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And plus he was an operative for the U.S. military during World War II and the Korean War, and he was undercover even then. So I came to realize later that he had to have serious PTSD, and nobody even knew it because he was incredibly violent, and he was diagnosed as being a paranoid schizophrenic.
Oh, so...
And I think at that time, he just was really suffering from what he had saw and what he had to do. But as a teenager, of course, I didn't know that. He was just a horrible human being.
So this book is really about you, then, yeah, and your family.
It is. It's written first person, present tense. So you go along. The opening line is from Hunter Thompson, "Buy the ticket, take the ride." And Hunter Thompson was a big influence on me with gonzo journalism. And as were Kerouac and other of the Beats, they set the way for creative people. And so the book is written first person, present tense, and you become absorbed in it as if this is happening to you. And it's not all pretty. There's a lot of violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, and just trauma that was experienced during the 60s. There is a bit of love and peace, and we can change the world in it. But that was done by a minority of people. Anyone in the peace movement, we were by far in the minority. The majority of people were just doing what they were supposed to do and doing what they were told to do.
The 60s was kind of a weird generation. I mean, I was a little bit young. I remember some of it. I remember the Beatles music, and I remember watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon in 1969. And it was a funny story because my father had been complaining that we didn't have a color TV. And he kept saying, well, I'm going to go out and get the color TV and get a color TV. So finally, a couple of weeks before the moon landing, which was like the biggest news in the United States at the time, he goes out and he spends, and color TVs back then were expensive. They were a lot of money for.
And rare.
And it was, I think he spent $600, which was a whole lot of money in those days, because we were very middle class. And he goes with the station wagon and he wants to bring it right home. He didn't want to wait for delivery. And the thing weighed, 900 pounds or whatever it was. It was enormously heavy. So he had to round up a couple of the neighbors to come help him move it into the house, to lift it, to get it into the house. So he gets it set up, gets the antenna up on the roof and everything, only to find out that the moonshot videos and stuff was all in black and white anyways. And I just remember laughing, and he was so angry. But, you think about it now, I mean, they were wearing white spacesuits, and the moon is gray and the sky is black, right? The space is the black sky. There's no blue sky on the moon.
Exactly.
I don't know what he was expecting. But.
Well, these things, people today, I think, don't realize what you're saying, how incredible it was to have a color TV.
Oh, that was a big deal.
And it was a huge deal, and we had one, and friends would come over to watch it. It was one of those huge console sets, like what you're describing,
that's
900
what he bought.
pounds,
yeah.
speakers on either side.
Yep.
And it was a different time when even the smallest things were exceptional.
Yeah, the speakers on either side, I remember that. And it had a record turntable.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
The top would flip up and you had it, yeah.
Right, and an AM/FM tuner.
It was an entertainment center.
Entertainment center, that's it. And, I would love to have that thing now, just as an antique showpiece. It'd be so great, particularly if it was working.
Well, and at that day, I remember a whole wall in our house was cleaned out because, cleared out, and that was the only thing that sat there. And it was a beautiful piece of workmanship, too. They were usually wood with cloth covering the speakers.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a centerpiece in a home, if you had one.
I think that's one of the reasons why they were so heavy, was because they were made out of like solid oak or something. They used real hardwoods for those things. And
and the big tubes in the TV.
And the tubes and all that, yeah. Right. The cast iron base for the picture tube.
Well, and the thing was, it was a centerpiece, and since you only had one in the home, we had a thing every Saturday night and Sunday night. It was family night with the TV.
Yeah.
And we'd all gather around, no matter how dysfunctional we were, and choose we were offered a choice of TV. It always went to whatever my dad wanted to watch. But
of course,
it was a centerpiece.
So I got to ask you, since you were in the L.A. band circuit at that time, did you ever run across the Mamas and the Papas?
Cass Elliott's house.
Cass Elliott,
yes,
yeah.
I think a couple of parties were there. And the thing to consider is that I was born in 52, so I was 14, 15. And so for these groups and people that were, at that time, much older than me, they were in their 20s. I was a little teeny bopper.
Yeah, ancient. In their 20s.
And, but yeah, Mama Cass's house always had parties going.
Well, that's what I've read.
And
I've read that her house was like party central for the LA bands in the 60s.
It was. Anytime if you didn't have any place else to go, you'd go there. The other one, and I'm going to not Peter Noon, the Monkees, Peter Tork.
Peter Tork.
Michael Tork.
No, Peter Tork. You had it right.
Yeah, he had a house up in Laurel Canyon also, which was just, I think, right across from where Crosby lived. And actually, a party there figures because in my book, because I, again, was put in a limo, stoned out of my head on LSD, and taken up there, and that's where I met Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, wow.
And the party scenes were insane. They just were anything goes. And I think I was just 14, or maybe I had just turned 15. And the party was pretty raucous, with everybody getting naked and everybody, jumping into pools and doing all this type of stuff. And it really wasn't a place for a 15-year-old, at least not one as naive as I was. And it wasn't until after I was almost 16 that I started waking up to what was going on. Otherwise, I just trusted everybody. It's fine. And I was usually on LSD or mescaline or something, and always having a good trip.
How old were you when you first took LSD?
I was 14.
Oh, you started young with that, yeah.
Yeah, 14. And I always said if I had a bad trip, I would stop. And I never had a bad trip until I was like almost 19. And that's the first chapter in my book, Barking Mad, which takes place at a Hells Angels party in the woods in Los Angeles. That was a pretty bad trip, and I stopped taking hallucinogens then.
Well, I think to be fair, a Hells Angels party would be a bad trip with or without LSD.
Precisely. And who got the blame? LSD. And actually, I don't think I was on LSD. I think one of the guys there gave me something, and I think it turned out it was angel dust or something, which was a different kind of thing, because it was not mellow at all.
No, as I remember,
they turned from bad to worse.
I was a little older when I took it. I was probably I think I was between 16 and 17. That was my summer of love, although that was in the mid-70s. Late 70s, actually. But it was the same LSD. It was like the orange sunshine, the Mickey Mouse little dot, purple dot. What do they call it? Microdot, purple dot, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microdots.
And it was just, I mean, I remember being in my friend's basement, and one day we took it and we'd play records and we just laid there. And you remember that awful fake wood paneling that everybody put in their basement to try to...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we would just lay there on the floor with cushions and watch this fake wood paneling turn every color in the spectrum. And it was interesting when two people could get on the same trip and we'd go, wow, what color is it now? Oh, it's purple. Yeah, it's purple. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that in my life.
Yeah, and there's one of the vignettes that got left out of the book. My editor said, okay, you can't tell all these stories, and pulled one out. It's called Cat's Paw. And I was tripping, I think it was Orange Sunshine. And I looked in my hand, was a cat's paw. And it was really neat. And we were driving, and a guy in the front seat turned around. I had not said anything, turned around and said, wow, cool, who brought the cat? We were seeing the same.
You were seeing the same thing.
And it was like,
It's very strange how LSD had that effect. And I've heard other people say that too, where they were taking it with a friend or a group of people, and people would connect in some bizarre way, seeing the same thing that really wasn't there. It's like two people having the same dream almost.
It was like that. And to go back to Jim Morrison, with Doors of Perception, we thought that it would open your mind so that we all are connected in some way. And if the doors of perception were opened simultaneously, we'd be in the same place. And so it was really a coming together of people. And whenever I did, except when I was doing acid to go to school, and that was just because I didn't want to be there. But otherwise, tripping with friends, it was always communal. And it was a way of establishing a deeper connection with each other.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I ever would have wanted taken it alone. I think I would have been afraid to do that. I don't know. Did you ever take it by yourself?
I took it when I went to school often. I would go to school stoned on usually Orange Sunshine. This was the most
well, you weren't
popular.
alone, though.
Yeah, I didn't go out in the desert alone or anything. Anytime I did any type of peyote or those types of things, it was always with a group of people out in the desert.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I mean, I wouldn't lock myself in a room and do it by myself because I would have been afraid to do that. I had to have people around when I was doing it.
And what I said, at least my perception and my friends' perceptions was was a way to build a deeper connection with other people. So you did it with other people.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think at that point, we should probably end this interview. We're getting close to a half an hour's worth.
Talked a little bit about Jim Morrison, a lot about drugs.
And a lot about
drugs. If I can say something here.
Yeah.
Drug use in the 60s, no matter what else, the drugs to me seemed a lot more innocent. And they weren't inciting people to violence. They were inciting people to a deeper understanding of themselves and others. So part of the title of my book, Surviving the 60s, is that I think I survived because it was a more innocent time and the drugs were far less dangerous than they are now. I think if I did any of the things I did in the 60s now, I would not have survived.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. And even just the marijuana now that is legal in many states is about 3 million times more potent than what we were smoking back then.
Tell me that my niece brought some down for my husband and I to try maybe about 2 years ago. I took like 2 hits, and we were both plastered to the couch, unable to move for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I was like, what is the point of this?
It's paralyzing. It's paralyzing.
And I don't get
It's not a nice feeling. It's not a nice feeling at all,
Thank you. Now my niece loves it, and other people do. And she said, well, you just have to build up a tolerance. I said, I don't want to.
Yeah, been there, done that. It's
Exactly.
like time to move on. But yeah, it's amazing that the stuff that we had then was so harmless, and yet it was massively illegal. And now that it's becoming legal in states, this stuff is like, nuclear. It's like industrial strength.
That is a good term.
Yeah.
Industrial strength.
It's very strange.
Absolutely.
Well, Donna, we got to wrap this up. Thanks so much. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It is donnaconrad.com. And if anybody would like to go on, sign up for my website, and I'm always open to talking to people, exchanging emails, going over what the 60s was like, or talking to other writers. I teach at writers' conferences and teach a lot about writing memoir as well as flash fiction and historical fiction. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, just Donna at donnaconrad.com or sign up for the website.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was a lot of fun. Very interesting conversation.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jocie McKade. Hi, Josie. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing pretty well. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. So let's see.
Oh, thank you for hosting me.
You are an author. You've written, how many books have you written altogether?
Right now, about 16.
Oh, quite a few. And you've been doing this full-time as a career, or are you doing something else as well?
Well, actually, I'm a jack of all trades. I've had several different vocations, but mostly I've worked almost 20 years as a librarian, which kind of satisfies my need for books. I don't write my novels full-time, but I do write full-time. So I do a lot of writing that is nonfiction and for magazines, advertising, blogs, scripts for book trailers and short, how-to videos, those technical ones. I'm the person that writes those.
Oh, I see. Okay. What kind of how-to videos?
I've done some for how to use different programs, such as, now you completely got me befuddled, like using CreateSpace, using different Canva, things like that for other authors to help them do some self-marketing using those programs to do some promotion. And I've also done a few for How to Weld.
How to weld? Oh, wow. Okay.
How to Weld, yes.
Let me
I've
ask
written the scripts for those. My husband is actually the one that does all of that, but I write the scripts for him. Otherwise, it comes out as do this or do that. So.
Okay. Let me ask you something about those programs you were talking about for marketing authors, because we get a lot of authors on this show, and I think that might be interesting. I've never heard of them. So what do you do with those?
As far as using those programs?
Yeah, I mean, what does it do? Actually?
For marketing?
Right.
Canva is one. There are most of the programs that I use have a free option as well as a paid option. The free option does give you a pretty wide range. Of course, you do get more with the paid. Canva is one where you can go in and make pretty much anything you want for social media, from Twitter to Facebook covers to Facebook posts to Instagram. It even has options on there to make digital flyers, posters, and there is a print option on there well. So if you create a digital poster, let's say for a book signing, and you would like to have it printed out to hand out or to put on your table when you're signing books, there's that option on there as well. You can print it off as a PDF and then print it off on your home computer, or even take it to a commercial printer and have it printed off for you. There's BookBrush, which is one that's basically a drop and drag. They've got very good preset things for Facebook or Twitter where you can take your book cover and drop it into a pre-done template. And there are hundreds to choose from. Again, it is also one that has a free portion and a paid portion. And they're very good. You can do them seasonally. You can do them under the genre that you write. And there's some that's just pretty vanilla, generic things, too.
Well, that sounds really interesting. What was that one called?
BookBrush. And that one is aimed strictly at authors. Canva is marketing for many different businesses, but BookBrush is strictly for authors.
So is it bookbrush.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay. No, I want to actually try it because I think that it's worth promoting if it's something that is easy to use, and, you know, I would give it a shot. Because there's a lot of self-published authors out there that are not necessarily that tech savvy. So to find one that was easy to use, I think would be a good thing to promote on the show.
For all of them that I've had the distinction to use, I would say BookBrush would be one of my very top ones, if not the top. It does have pricing from free up to I'm not sure. You get, of course, the more you pay, the more options that you get.
Right.
It has cover creators. It'll create covers for box sets, and you don't have to be very computer literate. You know, learn how to use every new program that comes along to use it. So if you have a book cover and an idea of how you would like to promote your book, you can usually find a template in there that will suit your needs.
Now, does it actually post to your social media, or is it just the creation of the collage?
No,
itself?
It's just as far as I know, it doesn't. Maybe one of the higher end options, paid options, might do that. But for what I use, it does not. I just download it and then I upload it to whatever social media that I would like it put on.
Okay, so I assume then, talking about this, that you are a self-published author.
I am. I was traditionally published as well. I got rights back from a traditional publisher, and since then I have been self-published.
So you were traditional. Oh, that's interesting. Why did you switch?
It was a small publisher, and while they did a fine job, they had a lot of authors under their umbrella. So, you know, unless you were the one at the front of the line that was making the most sales, you kind of didn't get the marketing and treatment that you needed to get to the front of the line in sales. So I decided to take it back myself and do the marketing and so forth and promote it the way that I wanted to. And I can obviously put myself at the front of the line. I'm not always the best at marketing. I think marketing tends to be the bane of an author's existence. But it does afford me the opportunity to do marketing that I want and not have to wait on them to get to me to do that.
Well, that's a good point. And also from other interviews that I've done on this show and people I've talked to, creative artists are not necessarily the best people to handle their own business. It's two different sides of the brain. And, you know, that's why traditionally artists had managers to handle that.
Yes.
You know, and then you could just concentrate on your craft, on your art. But nowadays with self-publishing and social media and indie music artists, I mean, it's become DIY, where you really have to know how to do everything yourself, unless you can afford to pay people.
Have to.
Yeah,
afford it or have someone in the family that volunteers their services. That helps too.
Right, exactly. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book. This is a book series, right? Mason-Dixon is the series?
Yes, it is. It's called Mason-Dixon Mysteries.
Mysteries, okay. And the book cover I'm looking at is The Line is Drawn. When North meets South, it's murder. Who's the dead guy on the beach? Is that somebody you know, or is that just a model?
You'll eventually know in the book he is a bad guy, and one of the characters in the books has a bad habit of stumbling over dead bodies, and which leads them to an investigation. The series, basically, one of the characters is from Alabama, and the other one is from Massachusetts. They're sisters. And the premise of the book is, it started for me many years ago because all of my family were born and raised south of the Mason-Dixon line, and I'm a Yankee. So my mother used to tease me that I could go from y'all to you guys in the same sentence because I was so used to spending summers on both sides of that Mason-Dixon line. So my thought was, what if you had two sisters that didn't know each other? One was raised in the North and one was raised in the South, and because of circumstances of parental death, they meet. And that's how Mason and Dixon began.
No, when I asked about the dead guy, I was actually wondering if that was a photo of somebody you knew or if it was just a model who posed for the picture. I don't mean that he's dead. I just mean
personally.
Oh, okay. All right. So he was like a stock model or something that just posed for this?
Yes, I actually had someone else do these covers, and it was a stock photo that they used.
Oh, all right. Okay. No, because it looks like, you know, you could have had your husband or your brother or your neighbor or somebody pose for this thing. You know.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So I didn't know who it was. Okay. So we don't know who that actually is. Right.
No, we don't.
Okay.
No.
Funny. That's an interesting modeling job. Here, go lie down on the beach and pretend you're dead. I wonder how much you got paid for that.
There you go. There's a whole new line. I could go, be the corpse for covers of Mystery Magazine.
Yeah. I mean, that would be so easy because, well, you think about like fashion shoots. I mean, they have to move all the time and change their expression, and it gets to be a lot of work under the lights, where if you just have to lay there and play dead, I think that's a pretty easy gig.
I do too. I think that's a brilliant idea. I wouldn't have to worry about hair and makeup looking good. I mean, I'm a corpse. I mean,
you want to look as bad as you possibly can, actually.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see. Maybe I'll put that out on my Facebook and see if anybody responds. You know, how much do you get to do modeling as a dead body?
There you go.
Because they wouldn't. I suppose you'd get paid by the hour, like most models do. But I
probably,
can't.
Or maybe by the gig. Some of them also work, by the job. So
yeah.
In my case, if it was husband or family member, it would probably be paid in cookies. So.
Yeah. Okay. How many books are in your book series now?
Right now there are 4 in Mason-Dixon, and I'm currently working on the 5th one, which I hope to have available by February 2022.
Okay, so The Line is Drawn, it says book 1, so this is obviously the first book in the series. Are the books standalone in the sense that you could read number 3 to start and still understand what's going on?
Yes, you could. They're all standalone. If you start from the beginning, of course, you get the nuances of character development and how they came to be, and certain verbiage that will make more sense to you, as it does in most series as the characters evolve. But yes, they can absolutely be read as standalone.
And you said you've written like 16 books altogether. What are some of your other books about?
I have another series called The 3 Bears.
The 3
Everything
Bears?
I write, as you can tell by by me has a tinge of humor to it because I see life very humorously. The Three Bears is actually a romantic comedy series, and there's 4 books in that series. And the Bears, as in the last name, B-A-E-R, they own a ranch in Wyoming. And the series opens with a backup goth singer being dumped in the backwoods of Wyoming.
Oh, okay. All right. So this has nothing to do with Goldilocks.
No, nothing to do with Goldilocks, no.
Okay.
Only there are 3 bear brothers, so maybe. And she's blonde, so there you go.
Well, what was the deal with the 3 bears now? I forget. Oh, the porridge was too hot, too cold, and just right. Yeah, okay.
That's right. Went through, I think, 3 of them to find the perfect porridge and the perfect house. And yeah.
Well, it's been a while since I've read that book.
Yeah.
I think it's probably been over 50 years since I read that book.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah.
But I read it quite a bit to my young ones, so it was fun.
Well, it's amazing how some of those stories have just passed the test of time, where some of the stories are hundreds of years old, and they're international, and they've been translated into 100 different languages, and yet the kids all seem to know, no matter what country you go to, there's certain stories that like every kid knows. So I think that's great. It's kind of a way to connect everybody.
I do too. I think it just touches a common chord across cultures, and it's uniquely human.
Yeah, absolutely. So all 4 books of this series, the Mason-Dixon Mysteries, are out and available now?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Certainly. It is Jocie McKade, and Josie spelled a little strange. It's Jocie, McCade.com, and everything is on there. I think most of these have the first chapter available to read as well, and all of my other books are listed on there. I also have a Tea Leaf Reader mystery series. They're both short stories. I should have a longer version of that coming out next year as well. So most of mine, I've kind of gotten away from the rom-coms and tend to go with mystery, which is a preferred genre for me to read as well as to write.
Well, thanks so much. We got to wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck with your books.
Thanks for having me.
These books are available, ebook and paperback?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And they can just come to your website probably and order from there? Or?
They can come to the website, or they can go on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and I think they're on Apple at this point, but I know absolutely on Amazon.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Josie, for coming on. It was nice talking to you, and best of luck with all of your books. I hope they do well.
Thank you very much. I